Welcome to the In.It podcast. We're here at JD Kustoms. Thank you so much for having us, man. This shop is absolutely beautiful.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Dude, I'm so excited about this. Like, for the longest time, I've been a bit of I'm a guitar player, so I'm a bit of a gear nerd, as almost all of us are.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've gone down some crazy YouTube rabbit holes of like watching guitar videos and stuff, so there's a lot of things that I don't know whether they myth or fact.
Yes.
That I'd like to sort of sort out. But I think let's start at the beginning, man. Like, how did JD Kustoms come into being?
Sure. Well, let's try and shorten the story, but
you can go as long as you want, man.
Okay, cool. So basically, like I've always liked playing, and I used to be a drummer as a teenager and drum in a metal band, and do that whole vibe, which was really cool. And then started drifting towards guitar, playing a bit of guitar, and it never really clicked until my father passed away, and I inherited his guitar, which was in horrid condition. It was a cheap little classical guitar that needed a lot of work. And I decided, in his memory, to actually do a bit of work on it and try and sand it down. And, I did a horrific job, let me tell you. But it was the beginning of the journey. It's what actually ignited that spark.
Amazing, man.
To give me that idea of actually, I want to work on guitars. This is what I want to do. And I was very fortunate to meet Mr. Andy McGibbon, late Andy McGibbon, and to do an apprenticeship with him. So after a few attempts of showing him what I kind of do on the side, he actually let me work for him for a good 3 years. Really? And that was the core of my knowledge, learning the basics of the game of lutherie. And in that time, I always aspired to, have a workshop of my own one day and be able to do this type of work as a business as well. And it started in 2009. After my 3-year apprenticeship with Andy, I got into business with Marshall Music.
Okay. And
I had the pleasure to meet Dane Marshall, who has also, seen me grow through this time up to now. And it's been an amazing journey. It really has, yeah.
Awesome, man. Like the South African sort of community around music has always been something I'm very in love with.
Yes.
I think it's because we don't have that giant of an industry. There's not that much money or anything. There is money, of course, but it's not like in America or in the UK where the top artists are like millionaires. Franchef and Coke and everyone, they're not exactly making like a crazy amount of money off of just the music. So I think that anyone who's actually involved in the music scene and in the industry is doing it out of love, and I feel like that makes sort of such a tight-knit community that comes out of it. And from what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's very much the same from the lutherie side.
Yeah, Werner, you're absolutely right there. You'll find that a lot of musicians have day jobs in South Africa and they gig at night. They do this out of a passion mainly. There are musicians that have made a success and an international success, let's think about, for example, Boo was the first South African band to go onto MTV when MTV played music back in the day.
That's a cool little tidbit. I didn't know
That's
that.
it, yeah. And there is Parlotones is a good example. Seether's an amazing example of a band that did it internationally. But you'll find that in the South African music industry, the Afrikaans scene, the gospel scene, the Afro jazz scene, the DJ scene. Look at Black Coffee. Yeah. These are, and also let's not forget about I did mention Afro jazz, but also the hip hop scene and Kwaito and things like that are definitely the bigger part of the South African music industry, and always driven by passion. And you say it kind of refers to us as well doing this as passion as luthiers, and yes, it started that way, and it became lucrative over time.
Yeah.
It was definitely a journey that took a lot of blood, sweat and tears to get to where it is now.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, but it's been fantastic to go through it, and now I can see the light now. 10 years, 11 years in as a business, we are acquiring some equipment that we never believed we'd be able to use, like CNC machines, 3D printers. As technology has risen, so have our skills, so have like our acquisition of skills through YouTube and the internet.
YouTube is such a powerful learning tool, it's ridiculous.
Very much, yeah, very much.
But I think it's still important that you sort of built it up from scratch. Like, it wasn't like, let's say just somehow you win the lottery and you decide, oh, I want to become a luthier, and then you just buy all this gear, and you hadn't gone through that whole process of learning all the skills and learning what would actually be a useful piece of gear to have. Like, I feel like that experience is almost worth more than the gear itself.
I agree, definitely. Well, there's that misconception that you are able to work on a lot of things at a beginner level. But I can tell you, doing a guitar setup, for example, is something that I still learn from 11 years into business and plus 3 with an apprenticeship, so 14 years. You will never find a guitar that will be predictable. They all have their own way of settling, and that is something that takes a skill to understand. And being able to do the bare minimal work on a fretboard, for example, is something that takes finesse. It takes getting a hand to it. It's also a muscle memory thing of being able to understand what is happening in front of you and not doing too much where you could ruin a job.
Yeah.
But it is definitely a trade that demands many, many hours of practice, and it's nice to see that you can achieve a lot when you put your mind to it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Especially now when you have all this, the internet and all this information at your disposal. I feel like if you really want to do anything and you put your mind to it, like, anyone can learn, or anything.
Definitely. And there's always there's this weird line in between the professional that's been doing it for many years and the guy that's trying to do this work as a non-professional. So what I mean by that is, also because of the internet now, all of a sudden there's a very big amount of experts now. All of a sudden, so now everyone can work on a car or work on a guitar. And if you're trying to achieve the levels of like Ferrari or Taylor guitars, to get to that point is something that requires a huge amount of work, business-wise, skill-wise, also socially. Understanding your customers, giving them that respect that they deserve, and handling problems in a way that is always done ethically. So on our side, that's been the strongest element of our business, is that things can go wrong and customers will be upset. It's the approach that makes all the difference. It's the way that we resolve those problems that makes the difference for us.
I've always been kind of curious about that, because of course you might get a guitar in where, let's say, it has a slightly cracked neck, but then the guy who brought it in didn't know that it was cracked in the body as well. And then you fix one crack and then the other crack sort of goes wrong, and then there's a whole thing.
Yes.
Like, how does that whole process sort of go? Do people kind of accuse you of breaking stuff, or?
No, yes, all the time. And it's a process that we've streamlined. So the way that we do it now is our assessments are incredibly good. So we take photos of the instruments when they arrive, photos when they leave. We use actually an amazing system called Trello. Trello is very popular as a workflow system, and the beauty of it is that we can take photographs of each instrument as a card and as a job card. So this instrument has been booked in, it's had photos before it came in. As we go through the work, we take snapshots of that. It gets referred back to its original job card. For that we use an online accounting system that we use for the logistics side of things, the booking in side of things, the customer base side of things. So we work in between these two systems, Trello and our accounting system, which is QuickBooks. Because we're not accountants here, and that's not our job. So QuickBooks is great for someone like me that is not an accountant, that needs to use it as a POS, point of sale system. And for the accounting side of things, we go through an accounting firm that specializes in that, so that it's not an area where we can make mistakes.
No, amazing. So like every step of the process is sort of documented along the way.
Yeah, as much as we can. If you look at our workstations, each technician has his own laptop, and he's got access to his whole workflow system from his laptop. And it makes life a lot easier to know that the guitar's in storage, it's been booked in, it takes however long to get to the bench, the customer knows this, it gets to the bench, it gets worked on. If it needs to wait, it waits in a certain section for parts to arrive, then it gets completed, photos are taken, and the instrument is then ready for collection. It stays back into storage. So nothing in the workshop is just sitting there. It's in storage until the workflow it gets started and completed, and then back into storage for collection. And that's great. These are processes that we've learnt by burning our fingers, by being late on promises, and like I think the most important step of this journey has been to consider the mistakes and to change them.
Cool, man. Yeah, like I always feel like those kinds of systems sort of always come out of necessity. But like going back a little bit to the apprenticeship and whatnot, like I'm looking around and I'm seeing cellos and guitars and all kinds of different things. Like I can imagine when you're learning, it's probably very dependent on what work comes in at the time while you're doing your apprenticeship as well. Like how does that whole...
It is. The apprenticeship was nice because I was under Andy's wing, and mistakes that he knows he could guide me through. As soon as I started JD Kustom on my own as a one-man show, then all of a sudden I was thrown in the deep end, and having to sort out mistakes or problems that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah.
So that was the hardest part of the transition, is now being alone. But it was a lot dependent on the work, yes. As in, this comes in and you work on it and then see the certain problems. But it's also dependent on what you do after as well, in terms of research, in terms of meeting people that know better, getting in touch with Taylor Guitars International, with Gibson, factories that have a lot of knowledge, and doing training under them. So working with Taylor Guitars throughout my journey has been amazing, because they support a lot of their technicians outside of their country and their region.
I wouldn't expect that. I would think they would kind of want to keep their little secrets to themselves.
Yeah, it would seem that way, but actually when they've got guitars in Africa that are problematic, they want to have someone in Africa that knows how to deal with those problems, instead of shipping them back and working on them and shipping them. The shipping costs already are massive for an instrument, and anything can happen in between. In between its trajectory back to the factory.
I was about to say, shipping guitars is always the scariest. Like even just saying that phrase freaks me out a little bit.
And guitars like that are worth hundreds of thousands of rands. You can easily buy a Gibson or a Taylor guitar over 100,000 rand. And obviously they've got the entry level line, but the guitars are worth a lot more than the general idea people have of them.
Yeah, it's also, besides the monetary value, you have someone's grandfather's old Gibson.
Of course.
Like that's something entirely
different. Gain value. You're a gear junkie, so you know this, but someone that's, has maybe got a son in their family that plays guitar will know a little bit more. But someone that doesn't know, a guitar's a guitar. It's got 6 strings and that's it. But it's a lot more than that. It's like the quality of the wood. It's the workmanship. It's the brand. It's the accessories that are on it. It's the manufacturing process. It's got to do with a lot of elements that now determine the price. It's like you say, the vintage value. An instrument like a Stratocaster from the 1960s has become a heirloom. It's become a collector piece. It's got a value that is a lot higher than something you buy off the shelf right now. And also there's the let's take the Fender example. The guitars that are made in America compared to the ones made in Mexico, compared to the grade line, which is made in the eastern region, so like Korea or China, all the Squire stuff will be cheaper. It looks the same, but it does not cost the same. And it definitely does not handle the same as something in the higher range of products.
I think with the like sort of lower end guitars has always been, you get these gems every now and again. They just, for some reason, that specific one feels so good.
Yes.
And they just work, but then you can't go and buy that exact same model and expect it to feel the same.
Yes.
It's like I feel with the lower end stuff, it's not necessarily... Yeah, it's not necessarily less quality. It's like there's less quality control that happens afterwards, and not each one of them will be up to the same sort of scratching. Like I have a Squire that, honestly, to me, it feels better than a bunch of Fenders that I've played on. And I love it to death. Like I don't really care about what name is on the headstock. If the guitar works, it works. But there's also like you said, people that don't know the value of their own instruments. I had this whole story with my brother, where one of his friends kept telling him like, dude, I have this guitar that's like lying in my cupboard under a bunch of hockey sticks and stuff. You must just come pick it up at some point. And my brother didn't really think about it too much. When he finally went to go pick it up, it turned out to be an Echo from the 60s.
Okay.
With this beautiful neck that's like a bold rosewood almost, but it's got the craziest like grain on it and everything, and these old switches, and it's just the coolest guitar. But it's got a slight crack on the neck because it was just sort of not even in a case or anything, left at the bottom of a cupboard. He still needs to get that restored.
Yeah.
But like you just find these gems that people don't see the value in, and then if you put it in front of the right person, they would absolutely pick that thing up and love it for the rest of their lives. So like that's something I love about instruments, is they hold this inherent value that's not apparent to everyone, but each one of them has a story to tell.
They do, and that's where we come in. Being able to repair things like that. So there's been a lot of cases where people wouldn't know that you can fix a broken neck, and therefore it either gets thrown away or it lies in the cupboard for the rest of its life. And I think this is something that I've seen change over the years in business in South Africa particularly. The knowledge of, my guitar actually needs a setup, whereas before no one would know. They would buy a guitar because it feels good, and instead of going for the better guitar, they would choose the one that plays better. But the beautiful and better guitar can play beautifully, and the terrible guitar can also play beautifully. So you can have a terrible guitar that plays incredibly well, and an incredibly well put together guitar that plays terribly.
Yeah.
And that's all up to the way that it's been set up, the way that the strings are now closer to the fretboards, your action, the way that the curvature sits to enable the string to freely oscillate, and that whole equation of all these elements put together into a good setup, and that makes all the difference.
What's your viewpoint on setups? Like, do you set up towards someone's preferences, or do you feel like a guitar has an ideal setup for the guitar?
That's
like, of course, between slide and like someone who's playing just sort of normally, you have a higher action on the slide and whatnot. But like, what's this general approach to setups?
Well, that's a question that gets asked when the guitar comes in for a setup. Is, have you got a preference? Are you a gospel player in a church band that's going to strum really hard? Or are you a jazz guitarist that plays very lightly? What is your string preference in terms of thickness, gauge? These elements all determine how the guitar needs to be set up. And then there's industry standard. So, typically a Strat won't be set up the same as a Les Paul, which won't be set up the same as a 6-string steel string guitar, which won't be set up the same as a bass guitar, a banjo, a double bass. All these things have their factory specs. And a lot of players like to be below them if they play gently, or slightly above if they play heavily. They all have their different gauges that they want to play with. So yeah, that's a very important question. Is no guitar will be set up the same, and no guitar can be set up the same in terms of the guitar itself's personality and the same goes for the player.
Yeah. Like I've had some guitars where I come from a metal background mostly, so I like.
My heart belongs to metal, man.
Like it started as like I want to be the most metal guitarist ever and play as fast and whatnot as possible, and then I slowly just drifted towards, but rock and roll is really fun.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be like the fastest, craziest thing you can play, as long as it's got that like.
Yes, it's funny you say that, Bernard, because I also did my apprenticeship at Andy's, and I was like Flying V, Dean guitar, Razorback. That's my vibe, and now I'm like acoustic guitar, John Mayer, like, so I've become a bit of a purist over time, and I think with the experience of seeing guitars all the time. When you look at a Strat or a Telecaster, a Les Paul, a Taylor guitar, a Gibson songwriter, all these guitars have done so well for a good reason, for a good reason. And those are the ones that will sell the most in this global industry, and for good reason.
Yeah, no, a classic's a classic for a reason. Like that's
definitely.
That's always been the thing. What's your sort of preference in guitars?
I'm a big Taylor fan. I really like Taylors, and so I play a 512 limited fall.
Ooh.
So 5 is the first number. That means that it's actually made in America, in California, at the El Cajon factory. Anything below 2, 2 and below is now their Mexican range, just so that you know.
Yeah.
And the 1 means it's a 6-string. The 2 is the shape, which is a grand concert. So it's a relatively small guitar. I'm not the tallest guy, and it's a parlor type of guitar. So good for fingerstyle. The bridge sits more in the middle, so it's very punchy. And to me, that's like my favorite guitar in the world. Before that, I had GAS, which is guitar acquisition syndrome.
Yeah.
And it was a big problem because I was trying to find which one suits me the best. And in my collection of now 15 guitars, which I've tried to trim as I go, I only play one.
Yeah.
And it's that particular guitar. So if I do play my GS Mini, it's because I'm traveling around with it. If I play my Larrivee guitar, it's because I'm learning on a full-scale instrument. The 512 is slightly shorter scaled, and it's the one I love. But yeah, preference goes to a Les Paul, a Strat, a Telecaster in the electric department.
Classics.
That's it. But I mean, I'm not an electric player. I can really appreciate what they are. They're awesome to work on compared to acoustic guitars. Acoustic guitars are pedantic. They're always swelling, shrinking, depending on humidity, temperature. They kind of have a life on their own. And an electric guitar stays pretty stable. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's your take on the tone wood argument?
It's very real in the acoustic side.
Yeah, I'm specifically talking about electric.
On electric, it does have an influence, but not as much as you think. It's a lot to do with the pickups. It's a lot to do with the stability and the construction of the instrument.
Yeah.
But you can, slap EMGs on a broomstick and it'll sound damn good.
That's sort of I've been trying to dig through all the YouTube information that there is on the whole thing, and my understanding of it is it's more about your pickups, your scale length, than anything else.
Your gauge,
that as well. Like
your tuning, if you're going to play gent, you don't want to do it on a blues setup guitar with thin strings. So it's got a lot to do with that too.
And also the lower you go, the longer you want your scale length to be. Otherwise the strings are just flopping all around the place.
That's it, and they must be thicker as well for your drop Bs and all those type of tunings,
so I went down a rabbit hole of like trying to go the lowest tuning that I possibly can without realizing actually you're just making your mix sound muddier.
Drop Z.
Doesn't make anything sound heavier.
Just strum a 6-string bass.
No, there's people that play in drop E and then it's just E an octave below.
That's
which is
very low.
You're basically just playing bass at that point, and your bass is in such a low frequency that it doesn't even work really in a mix.
Yeah, it won't cut through that mix, I guess.
Then I realized that's like I said, I sort of drifted more towards rock and roll. Well, while I was doing that, I obviously started going back to sort of standard tuning, and I realized when I was just noodling some metal riffs in standard, they still sound great. They sound even better sometimes. And then you think about Megadeth played in E.
That's right, yeah.
Metallica played in E.
Good example.
No one really... It became such a contest with each other of who's playing in the lowest tuning, and I think that it's kind of slowly going to the reverse now, where people don't really worry about that too much. It's more about having a good, punchy, heavy-sounding mix than how low you're tuning
I agree.
it.
I agree. I think it's got a lot to do with also the change of equipment throughout the ages and the modernization of the recording studio and the gear availability for the average Joe. So a lot of people have been, like in contact with some amazing equipment, and they're trying to think outside the box, changing the tuning. When you're listening to a heavy metal playlist on all the albums that you have as a digital thing, if you're shuffling, because we don't listen to music the same. I used to listen to albums particularly, and to get through that journey from the first song to the last song as a teenager. And now you find that you've got all your albums mixed together on a shuffled playlist. So you're working through your playlist, listening to your music, and you go through Megadeth, there's a song from them, there's Metallica, and all of a sudden there's After the Burial. And that's on drop B. And now in your mind there's that difference. It sounds like something different because it's not being played on a standard tuning. And I think that's where bands wanted to play with tunings, is because of that, to stand out from the mix of the many songs that you're listening to.
It's a very interesting way of looking at it. I'm glad you brought up the thing of when you were a teenager, you sort of used to listen to a full album. Like one of the so my car's from 2004.
Okay.
And it can't read MP3 CDs, it doesn't have an aux input or anything. You can just play a standard old CD in it. And kind of it used to annoy the living hell out of me in the beginning, and then I realized the side effect of it was I'm listening to full albums. And there's something to that, like you said, the journey from the start to the finish, getting the whole point across of like what they were thinking when they put that album together. Like, I don't think people always realize how much time is spent on just the order of the songs on an album. And I really love that, but I also really love like having the playlist, having the everything at your disposal kind of thing. Like, exclusion is never something I enjoy in music, like gatekeeping or saying this is the right way to do this and this is the right way to do that is something I completely try and avoid. But I feel like there's a lot of value in listening to a full album from the start to the finish, at least once.
Definitely. Well, I mean, it depends for what as well. So I love electronic music too, and having a playlist that shuffles like that is great, because you get exposed to a lot more. So if you're using like a streaming platform, it's good to have that, because now all of a sudden you hear an artist that you never heard before. But there's that element that I miss from being, a teenager listening to albums. Is that I don't know if you remember this, but like, let's say the first time I heard the Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water by Limp Bizkit, I was like, this album is horrible. Today you put me on a desert island, I'm taking that album with me.
It's an interesting choice.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that even now, all these years later, I keep on learning something from it. There's a sound that I didn't hear, there's a guitar riff that I didn't really perceive in the same way, and you find that in those days you had to kind of get to understand the album by repeatedly listening to it, and then all of a sudden your taste towards it changes. Music doesn't have that opportunity today. Today it's, I don't like that song, put a thumb down on it and you'll never hear it again, which is also great.
Or it's just you only know a song
because you can filtrate.
Or you only know a song from a 15-second TikTok clip.
That's it.
Like, TikTok is where the music industry is booming right now, and I don't know how I feel about that. Well, I'm very happy for artists getting exposure.
Super compressed, and punchlines happening a lot quicker than before. You would go through, like, I don't know, you listen to Tool, and there's that whole tension that builds up to then have a breakdown, where now you want to hear that breakdown straight away, because otherwise you're going to press next or put a thumbs down on your song. And that's where the music industry makes its money now, is through that. It's captivating you within those first 10 seconds.
It's interesting you said about that, like, Desert Island album, which is one that you didn't like that much in the beginning. Like, for me, it's Led Zeppelin 3.
Okay.
But it was also, like, when I was 12, I sort of discovered my granddad's old turntable and set it up, and the thing still happened to work. And I was like blown away by it because I could listen to like my mom's old Creedence that she had to hide from her dad. And then I went out and like tried to buy some stuff, and it was just as things were sort of starting to come back for the vinyl scene. And I found Led Zeppelin 3, and I was like, oh, cool, Led Zeppelin. But like I'd only ever heard, you know, the Immigrant Song or the main sort of hits. I'd never sat down and listened to a whole Led Zeppelin album, and when I did, I was very underwhelmed the first time. I was like, I'm probably not going to listen to that again. 2 days later, there's this little voice in the back of my head that just remembered one bit out of a song that I enjoyed, and you go back and you listen to the album again, and then it's, okay, cool, there's like 3 or 4 songs on here that are pretty good, and then it just keeps going, and now there's not a second on that album that I would skip. Like every single part of it is absolutely perfect. It's very cool how that evolves and changes, but also sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes a bad album is just a bad album.
Of course, yeah, definitely, and you can't embellish it at all.
It's so what's like. I'm sure you've worked with some very interesting people throughout the years in the South African music scene. Like who are some people that might stick out for you?
So there's throughout the whole journey, there's definitely Victor Masondo, amazing bass player with an international, internationally recognized skill. Danny Lalouette, Carlo Mombelli, if we're talking about bass. There's also Tendai Shocks. I've had the privilege to really meet a lot of people in the Afro jazz community. So there's Galim Goveni, there's Lali Chabalala, those type of bass players. In the guitar side of things, Dan Patlansky, Johnny Clegg, and his son Jesse. Who can I think of? Michael Plaxton Harrison, left-hand player, incredible. The Parlotones and Prime Circle, the guys from Volvadinia in the metal scene. There was also Agro, Chromium.
Yeah, I haven't had that name in a while.
Yeah, Chromium did well when they were at the peak of their career. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, there's Josie Field, Janie Bay, Joe Black.
It's a lot of people like doing
Yeah,
very well
the
right
Black Hat Bones. Oh my God, yeah, they're the most fantastic people. Incredible band as well.
I think
there's so many that I must say I've been very, very lucky and fortunate to meet all the players in this industry over 14 years. You're going to meet a lot of people if this is what you do as a job, as a career.
I think also when it comes to those kinds of people, like a lot of them would go to a certain luthier through word of mouth.
Yes.
Like I don't know, I've never seen a JD Kustoms ad or in anything, but I've heard the name so many times. I have this old Taisco that I bought in Paris for like 1,000 rand.
Okay.
The thing with it is it has like old sort of classical machine head strip thing that I just ripped off because it's horrible. And then I wanted to just put machine heads in it, but it needs to be drilled out, and I do not trust myself to do that at all.
Yes.
And I've just been like waiting to save up a little bit of money. I want to do a full overhaul on it, but I knew for a fact I'm going to come here. Never having been here, never having heard anything, it's just so many people that I trust have said, JD Kustom, dude, go there.
Thank you for the compliments, man. Yeah. So we are doing something right, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, if you look at our logo, or our trademark rather, it's passion done professionally, and it definitely shows in our work. So I think that goes a far way.
Yeah, no, well, speaking to you for 5 minutes, I also wouldn't have any reservations leaving like any guitar here.
Yeah.
So
that's important. You'll find there's a lot of technicians that are amazing technicians, and then there's the messy side of their brain, where there's that organized chaos. And if I was lucky in my brain construction, is that I was given how can I say, without being arrogant or anything, like I was given the privilege of having an organized mind at the same time. And it definitely helps a lot to, bring your guitar to a place where it's going to be on a clean bench in a clean storage room, and it's going to be cleaned when you get it back.
Yeah.
That to me is like, I wouldn't take my car to a mechanic that's got tools lying all over the place, because I'd be scared it gets scratched. And the same applies to your guitar even more, because like you say at the beginning of our interview, it's got a lot of sentimental value. It's gone through its journey, it's got its story to tell, and now you don't want to send it to some guy that's just not going to respect that. And that's where the most prominent step of our work is to have the same respect for a guitar that's not worth much and one that is.
That's a very cool way of doing it. So, like, I'm sure there's some unique sort of instruments and things that come through here just plainly based on the fact that we're in South Africa. Like, are there any sort of standouts or anything crazy that you think is worth highlighting that's come through the shop?
South Africans are very brand conscious about instruments they buy in general, and with that comes a lot of high-end gear. So Paul Reed Smith guitars, Gibsons, like your standard high-end instruments, but we've had sitars in here, we've had Asian lutes, we've had old banjos from the 1920s. We've had organs, because our electronics department also works on some pretty funky stuff.
So you work on organs?
Yes.
I've got a Hammond I'm going to bring through to
you. Well, electronic organs, so not the church vibes that you'll find at a cathedral,
I recently inherited my mum's old Hammond organ.
Okay, yeah, we've worked on a few of those.
It's just got a bad cap that needs to be replaced. Other than that, it's still running.
Well,
those things were over-engineered to crazy.
They were, and they were so ahead of their times in terms of what were done on them. If you look at the plastic construction or the microchips that are on them, like this whole evolution of technology definitely was taken seriously on those type of instruments. And talking about technology, that's something that's us acquiring a 3D printer and a CNC machine has enabled us to now work on things we weren't able to fix before. Because now you've got a button missing on an organ from 19 Futsek, and all of a sudden you can now reprint the part that's missing, whereas you can't find this anywhere.
So what can you actually print with a 3D printer, or in terms of the parts? Can you do like a nut, for example?
You can, but it's going to be a plastic nut, so you can definitely cut one out of aluminium on the CNC machine. But when it comes to, are you talking about a guitar nut or a nut from a bolt?
No, a guitar nut.
A guitar nut, okay. So a guitar nut, you can cut that on the CNC machine, but the thing is they all come in different sizes and shapes, and they're very particular in how they get mounted on the guitar. So you can't just take the nut off and replace it with another one. There's the width on the neck, there's the height compared to its action and curvature, so that the string touches the first fret at the right depth. There's also the thickness of the gauge that's on the guitar, so the slot needs to be cut to the right thickness. So a nut we cut by hand, and we like to do that more and more instead of buying generics or aftermarket parts like Graphtec or Tusk. We like to cut it out of shin bone from a giraffe, and it's all ethically acquired through animals that have passed by being sick or old age, all through a very successful South African knife maker that also is in that business.
What? That's very cool.
So we get giraffe shin bone, which is, to me, one of the best materials available on a larger scale than trying to acquire, like at JD Kustom, we won't even use old ivory from old keys on old pianos. And I guess it is a waste of material that's just sitting there, but I'm a bit into the conservation side of things in my mind, so that is an important part of the way we get our materials. And The giraffe shin bone will be nice and dense. It will, transfer
quite a bit of weight
resonance.
it needs to carry.
Yeah, that's it. It will transfer resonance to the fretboard or the neck in the same way that ivory would. It's as hard as that, and it's a great material to work with. So if you've had a custom saddle made here or a custom nut, you'll really know the difference that it makes and the way that it polishes out. So that's something that you would then keep as much as possible cut by hand. But let's say there's a bridge on a 12-string guitar that you cannot buy anymore. We can cut you one with our CNC machine out of ebony, and that's construction is a lot more accurate if you use a CNC machine. And then printing, we would use that for keys on keyboards or mounting brackets inside keyboards, inside amplifiers. You can do a lot with a 3D printer and a CNC machine.
Great.
It opens up an entire avenue.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Is there anything you don't work on?
Well, we have had people come in with TVs, so visual tech.
Yeah.
We stay away from that. Or we've had ladies come with irons or like a kettle that doesn't work, and we try and stick to our guns purely on the audio electronic side of things, or the strung instrument side of things. So we won't work on pianos, for example. We will work on double bass, classical instruments. We don't do brass and woodwind.
Okay.
That's it. We will get into those fields eventually, because it's nice to, as we've grown, open up our product range, like the CNC machine stuff, for example. But yeah, we like doing structural repairs, setup work, electronics, spray work, so polyurethane, nitrocellulose spraying in our spray booth here, making components or sourcing parts from overseas on high-end instruments, that type of thing.
And then, are there sort of any very widely believed myths that you keep hearing from like your customers, for example, that you'd like to sort of get out there and set the record straight a little bit?
Yeah, we've got a funny meme that we use all the time, and it's the I do my own setups but and that is something we like to have fun about, because you can do a lot of stuff at home. You definitely can, especially if you're a tech savvy person.
I probably fall under that,
or if you're good with your hands, or if you're technically minded, absolutely. But there's a finesse to working with certain things that is not achievable unless you have been on the journey of mastering your skill, because no one can ever master their skills fully, but you can definitely be on that journey. And if you've done your 10,000 hours plus, you then fall into that category. And like I say, there's a lot of things you can do at home, and there's a lot of things that you can't.
Yeah.
And to have that respect and to have that humility is, I think, very important, because a lot of guys will not have that humility, and it puts sticks in your wheels, where I try and stay as humble as I can, and there's a lot of things that I will learn from other people, even by sharing thoughts, and having that respect goes a far way with the people that you meet that are then willing to share more with you as well, So yeah, that myth is definitely something that we like to talk about. But there's also the journey, and I think I have to give a lot of respect and credit to my team for what they've been through learning here as well, and being humbled by seeing the way we work and how far they've come. So I've got Edwin, my workshop manager, that has really become my right hand in terms of skills and thinking procedure. I've got Kusto, my electronic engineer, that handles everything that's got to do with electronics on a education basis as well, having qualifications towards his trade. And there's Nolan, who does all our logistics. He's our operations manager. He's just found his way to making sure that everything here is organized. There's Liam, who is also very interested in blacksmithing in his own time and who's just shot up in skills. Joshua, who is our electronic technician, who's also very good at not just the hardware side but the software side of things. And we've got Big Mac, who is the right hand of our electronics department. We've got Sarl, who is also very involved in our West Rand workshop. He does all our social media, and like everyone's kind of found their place here, and it's enabled me to shift my skills towards the business as a whole. And I think I see this a lot with technicians, is they're scared to share their skills with their apprentices in fear that the apprentice takes over the master.
Yeah.
But if the master doesn't grow, he will never stay where he is in his position. And it's forced me to learn more. It's forced me to give away processes that I don't have to work on anymore, like answering the phone to customers. That's not something that I can do anymore because I'm so busy with other things. And as a growth of this business, I think it's been imperative. It's been so important to share the skills and to enable people to grow and to step up to the plate.
It's a great way of looking at it. I always love the analogy of, it sounds so lame every time I say it, but it rings so true. It's like, life is like a stream, and if you can't move forward with the water, you're trading water and you're working harder to stay at the same place, and you won't stay at the same place. But you're basically shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to keep one thing the same. So you always have to be moving forward and expanding and changing your focus to different things as you've learned something. I feel like if you pass along certain skills to take away some of the more mundane tasks from you have more time to learn new skills that can come in as well and then be taught. And then it just keeps going, and everyone keeps growing and everyone keeps learning, and the business keeps growing. It's a beautiful thing. It
is, and the world changes all the time, and that's the scary part of it, but it's also the most beautiful part of it, is that before the hacksaw there was no table because you couldn't cut the wood into the shape that you needed. Now that you have a table, you can have a vice grip on the table and be able to do a better job at cutting something more precisely. That then enables you to make a machine that can cut things more precisely, that enables you to then create an instrument, and everything grows in that way. That's why as technology shoots up to where we are now, we've got now CNC machines available to average people like you and I that now can do things a lot faster, a lot better, and create better technology. And it's just this increments of skills and tools that enable us to actually, at the end of the day, think on a much larger scale. I think, when our parents were our age, they only had to, think about half the stuff that we think about now, because now we've got computers that flash information at us like never before.
Yeah. That's great, man. The whole world's changing and keeps changing faster and faster.
Yeah.
But dude, is there anything else you'd like to add or throw in there?
Yeah, just want to thank everyone that's been involved on this journey with JD Kustom, all the musicians that have supported us over time, the Marshall Music Group, and Dane Marshall that has enabled us to do what we do by giving us the opportunity to affiliate with them. I just hope that the world changes to a better place after this COVID pandemic. That our musicians will either find a way to change the industry for the better, or to go back to the ways of listening to music at concerts and being involved in that fun part of festivals and being together and having a drink and enjoying each other's company with some good music. I think, I really hope that that is the case.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to appreciate live music a lot more when it comes back.
Yeah. And also, I just want to give my appreciation to all the great people that have made instruments, like brands like Taylor Guitars, for getting involved with us, Gibson Guitars, and all these great products that we have the chance to work with. And passion done professionally, man. That's just such a good place to be in.
Amazing, man. Thank you so much for having us. I had a blast.
Yeah, Werner, thank you, man. It was good chatting with you. Yeah.
Awesome, man.